Okay, assalamu alaikum brothers. I hope inshallah you can hear me. I'm also using my phone in order to see whether everything can be seen properly. I'll just wait a couple of minutes. Apologies, I'm just trying to make sure because everything seems to be back to front here. Okay, anyway, bismillah. It seems okay, inshallah. You can see the board. I don't know if I'm going to use it or not, but just in case that I do use it, inshallah, it's there. Okay, so brothers, a couple of days ago I posted a question that was actually sent to me. It's a marker, by the way. It's a marker, just in case brothers were confused as to what was in my hand. So brothers, a few days ago, I posted a question that was sent to me. It was actually sent to me quite a long time ago. Unfortunately, I never got back to the brother. Just, you know, if brothers want to contact me, it's probably best either to put it directly onto my Facebook timeline, or just simply WhatsApp me the question, because I very rarely use the Facebook Messenger. But anyway, the brother, he sent me the question, going back a number of weeks now. Alhamdulillah, he's already received the answer to it, even before, you know, I posted this up. So, you know, he's fine with it, and he was able to answer it, inshallah, back to the skeptic. But he asked the question, he said, Assalamu alaikum, brother Sharif. I had a question regarding the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even the way of thinking with respect to coming to the conclusions that He subhanahu wa ta'ala necessarily exists. I was discussing this topic with a skeptic who asserted that everything that we hold to be true is only based on empirical evidence. After explaining how and why the scientific method is limited in nature, he actually agreed that we have to use the rational method, i.e. the five senses, the reality, brain, etc. The question he did pose to me was, the beginning of the universe is beyond our senses, and therefore rationality alone can never ultimately give us a certain answer. Then I mentioned that we can look at what we have in front of us today, what is within our senses, and conclude that everything is limited and dependent and requires something other than itself to sustain it. To that he replied that it may be true that things within the universe are limited and dependent. However, that doesn't necessarily apply to the universe itself, since the rules within the universe do not apply outside of it, or the fallacy of composition. Was wondering, how would you answer these two contentions? Number one, the beginning of the universe is out of our senses, so before the Big Bang we don't know what was before and what laws they followed. And number two, the rules outside the universe don't apply outside. So the rules inside the universe don't apply outside the universe. So there's really two questions that was asked here. The first of these questions was related to the issue of how do we, when we sense the limited things around us, and we say the phone is limited, the car is limited, the batteries are limited, the power station is limited, the sun is limited, nebulas are limited, all of these things are limited, and we also then go on to say that things are also dependent. How can we then extrapolate that to the universe itself, saying as a whole that the universe can be also considered limited and also by definition or by necessity dependent upon something else? So this was a question that's really posed. So how can we make that conclusion? And the second, obviously, aspect of this question is, how can we be sure that when we talk about beyond or outside of the universe, that this beyond or outside is something which is, you know, is the creator, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we're not directly sensing these things. Now, there's a few things. I'll just ask, are you going to have a Maghrib break? Omar, we already had a Maghrib break. We prayed Maghrib. It was 6 o'clock here, inshallah. But, you know, if you're still not prayed, quickly pray, come back, inshallah, and we'll continue. So when I was thinking about this question, and I posted it up, and I was thinking about the Facebook Live, I was thinking to myself, you know, should we just answer the question directly? Yeah, and alhamdulillah, I think on that Facebook post, there's about 92 different comments that came through. fantastic responses, alhamdulillah, from the brothers. So I thought maybe we won't necessarily, well, we will look at the actual answer or how to address, or one aspect of addressing this particular question. But also we wanted to maybe look at some of the frameworks, how to approach these types of questions, how to approach these types of discussions, in terms of rational belief, how to engage in discussions with atheists, with people who don't believe that there's a creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers, and perhaps maybe a sister, I don't know, sisters as well, if you're, brothers. If you want to ask a question during the Facebook Live, please do. If you want to respond to a comment, and you want to put your own comment, please do. I'll try and read out as many as I possibly can. If you want to raise any contentions against what I said, again, please do, and I'll try and read them out as well, inshallah, and try to respond to them. Just very quickly, very briefly about myself. I don't consider myself, specifically an expert, in philosophy per se. However, I have studied this particular area of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, I've studied it through my own teachers who themselves had studied philosophy, post-degree level. They themselves used to teach as well from an Islamic basis. They would teach also something called Nidam al-Islam, which I'm sure many of the brothers here probably have heard of. It's a book by Sheikh Taqiyuddin al-Nabhani that's gone through by Hizb ut-Tahrir, which goes through these discussions. And also there's another book that addresses this issue called At-Tafkir, Thinking, and also Shakhsiyya Islamiyya, which is a book I'm currently going through with other brothers actually. So I'm actually teaching this particular book to other brothers as well. And there's a long discussion around rational thinking, logic, the fallacies of the mutakallimun, as well as some aspects related to contingency argument when it comes to the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's some basic points about me in terms of what I've done. And also, I think maybe some of you may also know, I've also done a number of debates and discussions. In fact, the first debate that I did was in 2004, so that's going back over a decade ago, actually over 13 years ago. And when I did this, when I first did the debate, which was at Leicester University, that was sort of the first of its kind. Now, alhamdulillah, we've had lots of debates around the world. Brothers are debating atheists in Canada and America and Australia and around Britain. There's numerous brothers that are doing that. You see brothers on Hyde Park, Speaker's Corner, discussing with atheists, rational thought, all these types of things. But when I did the first debate in 2004, there was none of that type of discussion. It wasn't as widespread as we see it today. So when I went and engaged with the debate, I think it was a lecturer and somebody from the Humanist Society as well. I came to it without any, precursors, without anybody else or having seen anybody else do these types of debates. I didn't even see William Lane Craig. I know he may have started doing debates maybe a bit earlier than that period. So I don't think I even saw him do these types of debates. Alhamdulillah, I did these debates. And then as a result of that, I think other brothers thought, you know what, it's not a difficult topic. It's not actually difficult to address this particular issue. And so we saw one or two other brothers and a number of other brothers coming out and started debating atheists, demonstrating the weaknesses of their arguments and the strength of Islam. So that was all the way back in 2004. Since then, I've done a number of other debates on proof of God with various atheists. I even got invited, to Australia as well to do a debate there. I think that was a couple of years back, part of their Confident Muslim campaign. So anyway, so I thought, inshallah, we'll address this particular question. So the question really is how can we go from what we sense to the universe and then conclude what's beyond the universe? Yeah, that's what we're looking at. And so what we're really asking the question is our discussion, is it capable for us to generalize, to bring a general statement about the universe? So what is our statement? Our statement is the things that we sense are limited and dependent. So I'm just going to write that on here. Limited and dependent. I actually bought this, I think it was called Magic Chart or something like that, especially for this. So hopefully I'll try and use it as well. So we say everything's limited and dependent. And we want to talk about what do we mean by limited, what do we mean by dependent? Yeah, because these two things, you know, they have a specific definition in terms of a reality-based observation. What we sense from reality, and when we say things are limited, we mean a particular thing by this, or I mean a particular thing by this. And also what we mean by dependent. And what we want to show is when we say something is limited, by necessity, it's dependent. Yeah. So by necessity, we also say it's dependent. All we have to do is identify its limitations. Then we don't even have to know what it's dependent upon in order to understand that it is dependent. So when we say what is limited, we say firstly limited is anything that has definable characteristics. Yeah. So definable characteristics like weight, size, charge, yeah, and whatever other points that people can think about in terms of what is limited, or the limitations that any objects within the universe they have. So we say these things are limited. Now, if we now pull back and we look at the question that was asked, so we sense a phone is limited. And from that, we're therefore saying, well, all the things that we sense which are limited within the universe means that the universe itself is limited. Yeah? Can that be a rational point? Is that a problem, or what they call the fallacy of composition? Yeah? But I'll write that down here. Fallacy of composition. So before I go back to talking about limited and dependency, let's talk about very quickly fallacy of composition. Fallacy of composition basically means this, which is, if you know something which is, you know a part of something, then the fallacy is to assume that the part is what makes the whole. That's the fallacy of composition. So if I look at my mobile phone and I say, okay, the mobile phone is made of glass, the part of the mobile phone that I'm sensing is made of glass, then the fallacy of composition would be to assume that the whole of the mobile phone is made of glass. That would be a fallacy, because obviously I've not sensed the rest of it. And in fact, if I did sense the rest of it, then I might realise that it's got plastic, it's got metal, it's got wires, it's got, you know, other components, electronics, that make up the mobile phone. And it's not just simply the partial aspect, which is the glass. So that's fallacy of composition explained, hopefully. If anybody has any questions on that, please feel free to ask, what do we mean by fallacy of composition? So when we look at the issue of the question about limited, things are limited, yeah? Which means things have characteristics which are definable and therefore measurable. Then that thing is not really part of the fallacy of composition. It's not like we're coming from this conclusion and then assuming some particular property of the universe. We're not saying there's a particular property of the universe. We're saying the whole of the universe has a characteristic which is measurable, yeah, and has certain types of attributes attached to it. So that's what we are saying. Now, how do we understand that? How can we conclude that the universe is limited? Yeah. Well, there's a number of ways. Yeah. So what we're saying, limited is basically something measurable. Yeah. With specific, we're going to say, characteristics. Yeah, forgive the writing, you know, I'm not used to writing on the walls or whiteboards. So when we say specific characteristics, specifically what we mean is that they are measurable. Yeah, so it's something that you can quantify within that thing. So it's measurable, it's quantifiable. That's what we mean by that. So if we say, okay, the universe is other than that as a composition, then what we're saying, it's unlimited in characteristics, yeah? So there is no specific characteristics to it, or attributes, yeah? And put attributes as well. And secondly, we're saying it's non-measurable, yeah? So that's what we're saying. We're saying the universe is, if it's not limited, we're saying it's unmeasurable, and it doesn't have specific characteristics and specific attributes, yeah? specific in the context of measurable. Yeah, that's a very important point to emphasize. So obviously we say, well, the universe is not unlimited in its composition. Yeah. So as a whole, you can't say it's unlimited. Why can we not say it's unlimited? Because of a number of arguments. And there's quite a few, but I'll just go through one basic argument, which is to say, well, what do we mean by the universe? Yeah. So if we say the universe is the sum of all that exists, yeah. So we say universe equals the sum of everything yeah. So universe, sum of everything, that's what we term the universe. Now what do we mean by everything? We mean actually every sensed thing. Yeah. So we say universe is sum of everything, which means is every sensed thing. Now, every sensed thing is what? Is characterized by weight, maybe a weight, maybe a size, maybe a charge, maybe a specific amount of energy, i.e. there is limitations. So the universe therefore is a sum of, every limited thing. Yeah? Does that make sense? Is that okay? Is everybody following? Are we still got everybody on board, inshallah? So he's saying the universe is what? Is the sum of every limited thing. Yeah? So one way of arguing this point, which is a way that, sometimes I discuss this, and there's a number of ways. There's not necessarily just one only answer to this, but there's a number of ways. So the first way we look at it is to say, okay, don't know if I should rub that out, but I won't do. Can the sum, of limited I'll have to rub that out. It's a good job I've got non-permanent markers. Alhamdulillah. So can the sum of limited equal unlimited? Yeah? It's not mathematics, by the way. This is rational thought. So don't think we're getting into, complex mathematics. It's nothing. It's not very complex. Don't worry about that. So we say sum of limited. Can it equal unlimited? Yeah. We obviously say no. It can't equal unlimited, and there's a reason why we say that. Yeah. So let's just maybe take a step back. What do we mean by sum of limited? So we're saying if we add up all the mobile phones, if we add up all the grains of sands, if we add up all the Earths and all the planets, if we add up all the moons, if we add up all the nebulas, all the stars, within the universe, all the galaxies, if you add them all up, which are all limited, though quantifiable, they have specific characteristics and attributes which are measurable. They have maybe a particular size, maybe a particular weight, maybe a particular charge, maybe a particular amount of energy which is quantifiable. If we were to add all of this, could we equal unlimited? Could we get an unlimited number? Yeah, and we say no, you can't. The reason why you can't get an unlimited number is, i.e., an unlimited amount of things, of limited things, is because we say that's rationally impossible, and also it's logically absurd. Okay? So it's a contradiction. Now, brothers who have heard this before have probably know exactly what I'm going to say. So, please forgive me. You can maybe check some other YouTube or Facebook live video or whatever it is. But if you want to bear with me, inshallah, we'll carry on. So we say basically, can the sum of limited equal unlimited, and we can demonstrate that that is a logical absurdity and irrational thought. Yeah, it's an irrational idea. So how can we say that? Right. So there's a number of ways. The first way, or one way that I do, is I always give like a thought experiment. David Hilbert, very famous mathematician from Germany, he talks about this. He talks about actual infinite, potential infinite. Brothers probably already aware of this. But just to mention, isn't it? The way I came across, because I had to reconcile this in my mind, because I remember, good 10, 15 years ago, I remember there was a big debate amongst some of the brothers, in a brother's house in London. I won't mention which brother, but it was a brother's house in London. We used to debate late into the night, and one of the brothers was saying, could we not argue that the universe is unlimited, because if you add up everything together, it might have an unlimited amount. Yeah, there's nobody who's sensed the edges of the universe. Nobody has sensed the whole totality of the universe. And even if you have sensed a certain amount of the universe, or what you think is the totality of the universe, there might be a universe outside of that universe. And therefore, if you keep adding up, it could go on forever. So I had to work this out. I had to actually went, read some articles, read some stuff, books, etc. And then I had to really contemplate this in order to work this out. So I came up and I realised, actually, came across some articles, some arguments upon this, and then it clicked in my mind, and I thought, that's a really good point. So the argument, or the analogy that I gave and I thought up of, was the analogy of marbles, yeah, or peas, or whatever it is that people want to use, yeah. So I said, okay, can you have an unlimited sum of limited things, yeah, like numbers that go on forever? So can you have an unlimited sum of limited things? And I said, okay, so imagine if you had marbles, yeah, which I'm going to represent. Hopefully you can see that, yeah. So I'm going to call this my pile of marbles, yeah. So I've got a pile of marbles there, yeah. And if we say that the pile of marbles, so it's a thought experiment, if we say the pile of marbles, there is an infinite number of marbles there, and I was then to cut the marbles, this pile, this infinite number of marbles, in half, yeah. So what have I done? Have I halved infinity? Do I have half of infinite on one side and half of infinite on the other side? How many marbles do I have on either side? If brothers want to quickly write that on the comments, you can do. If you don't have to. So how many? So if I cut the infinite number of marbles, I've got an infinite pile of marbles, and I cut them directly in half, how many marbles do I have on either side of the pile? Yeah, on this line, if you can see it, hopefully. Nobody's answering. Are they just listening, waiting, anticipating? So how many marbles would I have on this side if I've got an infinite number? Yeah, do I have a limited number, or do I have an infinite number of marbles? I'd have an infinite number of marbles, yeah? So each pile, each half would be infinite, yeah? Because if it becomes limited, so if I suddenly cut the infinite number of marbles, pile of marbles in half, and I suddenly have a limited number of marbles on this side and a limited number of marbles on that side, then limited plus limited equals what? Limited. Yeah? So infinite on both sides, that's very good. Not sure. So I'd have infinite on both sides. So I'd have infinite number of marbles on both sides. So now let's say I cut them in another half. So I've got quarters. So how many marbles would I have on each quarter? Again, it would be infinite. Because every time I subdivide the infinite number of marbles, the pile of marbles, I have to have infinity. I can't have less than infinite. If suddenly that becomes limited, then limited plus limited plus limited plus limited equals a limited number. Yeah, but we have to have infinite. So infinite plus infinite plus infinite plus infinite equals infinite. Yeah, and we can keep doing this. We can cut them in as many, sections as we want. Yeah, many fractions as we want, and we will always have an infinite number. Yeah, so now we have one possible, or an aspect of a paradox. Yeah, paradox means contradictory statement. So something that's a contradiction. Like for example, if I was to say, this statement is a lie, yeah. If I say this statement is a lie, it's a paradox, it's a contradiction, because if my statement is true, that this statement is a lie, then it cancels that out. But then if it was true, then it would, it's a contradiction, isn't it? It can't be both. You cannot have that statement and you can't bring it into reality. In the same way, the infinite number of limited things is like that. It's a paradox, it's a contradiction. Because every fraction of infinity has to equal what? Infinity. Yeah? It cannot be finite. So it's got to be infinite. And I can keep doing that. So then we have one particular contradiction. First contradiction would be that this section here, if I shade it out, would have to be equal to the overall. Yeah, so the infinity here would have to be equal. You can't have greater or lesser infinities. You'd have a, there's a contradiction in reality, in actuality of this. Now somebody might say, which they haven't yet, well, what about Gregor Cantor? He was a famous mathematician who talked about different sizes of infinity in mathematics. He was talking about, yeah. In mathematics, you may talk about things like infinity, and you may talk about the use of infinity in equations and things like that. But generally, infinity is used. So in mathematics, it's used as a function. It's not used as a number. It's not used as a quantity. So that's some differences in terms of mathematics. And when we talk about in actuality, we're talking about a quantity. We're actually talking about a physical thing, a physical number of things. In this case, the physical number of things within the universe, which makes up what the universe is. Yeah, the universe is the sum of all limited things. Yeah. Okay, but if somebody says, yeah, but Gregor Cantor said this about infinity, so therefore we can have greater and lesser infinity, therefore this is not a paradox to say that one part of infinity is equal to the overall infinity, it's just a lesser and greater infinity. But the problem with this is that every fraction of an infinite sum of something, yeah, every fraction of an infinite sum has to be infinite. Every proportion of infinity has to be infinite. Otherwise, when you add them back up together, if you suddenly get to limited, then you add them back up, limited plus limited plus limited will equal limited. So we can say, okay, what if I was to take out of these, so this is an infinite pile of marbles, remember, for those of you who just joined. If we take the infinite pile and we take just 3 marbles away from the infinite pile, have we decreased infinity? No, we haven't, because it's still infinite. And even if they claim that we have decreased infinity, but it's just a lesser infinity, then this 3, which is a fraction or a proportion of the overall, is still finite. It's free. It's no longer infinite. So as a result, it's another paradox, it's a contradiction. We just said that every fraction of infinite must be infinite, or every proportion of infinite must be infinite, and then we've taken 3 marbles away from the infinite pile, so therefore it's no longer infinite, it's now limited, yeah? The number 3. So that's a contradiction. It's a paradox, yeah? We term here paradox. Well, why is paradox important? Because paradox, a contradiction, when you try to bring it into the real world, you're going to get, a contradiction effectively. You're going to get something which is right and wrong at the same time, which is impossible. Therefore, paradoxes cannot be imported into the reality. They cannot be brought into the real world. So when we say, can you have an unlimited sum of limited things, we've just said it's a paradox. Yeah? I'll try and highlight it for you. It's a contradiction. So if we now go back, I'll rub that bit off. If we now go back to what we said about the universe, can we determine whether the universe is limited? Specific characteristics and attributes which are measurable, yeah, and quantifiable. Same thing. If we say, therefore, the universe, then the universe, which is a sum of all limited things, then the sum of all limited things must also equal limited. So the universe has to be also limited. Does that make sense? The universe has to be limited. I've got somebody saying, oh, I see, that's good, alhamdulillah. That's one person saying, oh, I see, which is excellent. Everybody else see, inshallah? But if we divide the space up in half, haven't you limited it? But it's infinite, so it's confusing. Yes, it is confusing, but that's the point, because it's a contradiction. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. Once you start bringing it into the real world and talking about real world objects and talking about real world distances between me and maybe my phone or me and maybe my iPad, there's this limited limited distance between me and my iPad, yeah, or between me and somebody else. So because there's a limited number, and that's a proportion of the overall space of the universe, then the universe also has to be limited, because the universe will be the sum of that distance between me and my iPad. Yeah? Hopefully, inshallah, that's clear. So we've now said, okay, the universe is limited. Yeah? So that's the first part of it. Now the second part of it, which is to say, okay, why do we say limited also means dependent? Now we mean dependent in two ways, but actually they boil down to one thing. Yeah. In the first way we're saying limited is dependent is that those things that exist, they don't exist without the necessary, not necessary, but they're without a contingent dependency upon something else. Yeah. So for example, if I was to take my phone, yeah, for me to say that it has a particular weight, it's because of the gravitational force that's occurring upon the Earth, upon the phone. Yeah. So for me to know its characteristics, attributes of weight, there needs to be a planet. Yeah. There needs to therefore be weight. That's how I know that there's a weight. For me to say I can see my phone in order to measure its size, that means now I've got to see the reflection of light. So there's a relationship between light that's bouncing off the phone into my eyes. So there's a relationship, a dependency between the light and the phone itself, the object. Yeah. So in order for me to sense any limited thing, yeah, which means to sense its specific characteristics and attributes which are measurable, in order for me to do that, I need to know that it has a relationship between one thing and another. Yeah, between one thing and another thing. Yeah, so things within the universe. Does that make sense? Is that clear, or is that a little bit? Have I rushed over that point? So in order for me to say something is limited, I'm saying it has specific characteristics and attributes which are measurable. What are measurable is its charge, its size, its weight, its amount of energy, so the amount of light that reflects off it, etc. All of these things don't exist except in relationship with something else. So there's a relationship between one thing and another thing. So as an example of this, when we talk about water, yeah, I'll rub this bit off. Yeah. So when we talk about water, so we say what's one of the attributes or characteristics of water? Yeah. So we say the attributes or characteristics. One of them, yeah, or some of them are that it boils at 100 degrees Celsius, yeah, and it freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, yeah. So how do I know it boils at 100 degrees Celsius? Well, I have to put fire below water, isn't it? Yeah. So there's a relationship between the water and the fire in order for me to know its attributes. In order to get to 0 degrees Celsius, what do I need to do? I need to, cool it. Yeah. So there's a relationship again between water and heat in order for me to understand its limitations. That relationship is its dependency. Yeah. So that's the first part. The first part is that this aspect that things that are limited can only be known by its, sometimes we say maybe causal relationship between one thing and another. Yeah. So we may talk about that. The second aspect is that this relationship between water and fire, or water and heat, that allows me to know its attributes in order for me to then say, oh, that's water because I've got this liquid, I want to know what it is, so I'll boil it, it boils at 100 degrees Celsius, I freeze it, it freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, I can drink it, so it has the attribute of quenching my thirst. These are all relationships between that particular matter and other forms of matter, i.e. dependency. So therefore I know it's water. So in order for me to understand this relationship as well, then this relationship between fire and water, or heat and water, in order to know these attributes, they're not necessary, they're contingent. Yeah? So the relationship between limited things with other limited things, yeah, are contingent. Yeah, and not necessary, Now I'm going to be really quick, and I'll probably end it after this quick explanation. When we say contingent and necessary, these two terms have a particular meaning, yeah? And I'll just very quickly explain it. If I turn around, if I was to draw a triangle, yeah? So, for me to draw that particular triangle there, I would say it necessarily has to have three sides. 1, 2, 3. Yeah? It's got almost four sides there, so just do that. So it's got three sides. So that's necessary. But it's not necessary for it to be a black triangle. Yeah? It could be a red triangle. It could be a green triangle. It could be a yellow triangle. It could be any different type of colour of triangle. The fact that it's black as opposed to any other colour is what we call contingent. Yeah? Meaning it's dependent but not in a necessary way. Does that make sense? Isn't the Okay, what does contingent mean? So contingent, I think what I've said is that it means things which are dependent but not in a necessary way. So the fact that it's a black triangle as opposed to a red triangle, the fact it doesn't have to be black in order to fulfill the definition of triangle. But because it's black, then there's something that had made that as black, gave it its choice, yeah, gave it its determinant, yeah, to be black as opposed to red or any other colour, yeah. But if I drew a red, imagine this is red, yeah, it's no longer a triangle because it doesn't fit the necessary definition of a triangle, which has three sides, yeah. It's a sort of a weird circle, yeah. So that's what we mean by necessary contingent. So therefore, what we're saying there as a result is that the relationship between water and heat to produce its attributes is not necessary. The fact is, water could boil at 70 degrees Celsius. It could freeze at minus 17 degrees Celsius. Yeah? What do we mean by this? I mean that for me to know a triangle, I know it by its definition. I know before I need to even experience the triangle. Yeah. Before I've even sensed the triangle, if somebody says there's a red triangle or there's a triangle, yeah, of indeterminate colour, I already know what it is. I don't need to then sense it and then say it's a triangle because I know it by its definition. I know it's going to have three sides. If it doesn't have three sides, it's not a triangle. Water boiling point, I don't know it until I've experimented upon it. Yeah, until I've actually done an experiment, which basically means this. It means water by definition doesn't tell me, yeah, its attributes, its limitations, its size, its weight, its charge, its energy, its boiling point, its freezing point, etc. Yeah? It doesn't tell me these things. I have to experience it, which means that it could be any possible number. Any possible number. Yeah? So it could be 70 degrees, could be 110, could be... But our experiments show it's 100 degrees Celsius. Yeah? Now, really quick little brief detour just to explain this point a little bit further and explain the limitations of science. When we talk about water has a boiling point of 100 degrees Celsius, this is a generalization, isn't it? Yeah. So if I was to say all water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, yeah, that's a generalization. Why is it a generalization? Because I've not actually experienced all water. I've only done experiments of some water. Yeah. So some water has boiled that I've done, maybe at school we put our water in a beaker, put it over the Bunsen burner on the wire mesh, over the tripod, and we said, okay, it boils at 100 degrees Celsius, pure water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, and then we say, therefore all water boils at 100. That's a generalization, and that's called induction. That's where I go from a particular sensation and generalize it to the overall, yeah? And it's generalization. Why is that, slightly important? Because scientific thinking is built upon this. Scientific thinking is built upon reducing observational events to what you can see within or what you sense within a laboratory condition, and then you make a generalization. It's called induction. As opposed to deduction, this is called induction, yeah? Isn't inductive if we generalize for dependency of limited things based on water example. Yeah, that's right. So Arslan's right. So that's the point. We are actually generalizing that 100 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of all water. Actually, what we know is that only some water does. But what we also know is that water will have attributes, yeah, whatever those particular attributes are going to be. And if it has those attributes, then those attributes are going to exist based upon a relationship, yeah, a dependency. And that attribute is not necessary, Yeah, because if it's necessary, then it will be necessary by its definition. It's not necessary. Therefore, when I say water boils 100 degrees Celsius, that's not like, it's not a qat'i, definitive, definite matter. Yeah, that's just what we've experienced. And because it's based upon what we've experienced, it's not a necessary thing, but rather it's a contingent thing, like a black triangle as opposed to a red triangle. Yeah, does that make sense? Is that, clear? Because that's quite a heavy particular point to make. Yeah, is it everybody clear? I think everybody's gone quiet. I don't know. Everybody's leaving now. No, I'm joking. That's a really important point. So let me just repeat that point again. Is that the boiling point of water, 100 degrees Celsius, is not a definitive thing. It's a contingent thing. It's something we observe. It could be any number of options. Yeah, it could be that in the future, potentially, this is the reality of the scientific method. It could be in the future that water changes its boiling point. We don't know. Could be that be the case. Yeah, it's because it's not necessary. It's through experience, and that experience tells us it's contingent, meaning there must be something other than itself to have made water boil 100 degrees Celsius, meaning this relationship is not necessary, rather it's imposed. Yeah. Now, its imposition comes from outside of water, outside of the laws that govern water and govern its relationship with fire. So, it's therefore it's imposed. So it's outside of the physical universe. So water boiling is actually a mu'jiza to a certain extent. Yeah, maybe not in the technical Shari'i definition, but it is actually a one proof for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just by observation of water boiling at 100 degrees Celsius. And that means because it has to be imposed upon that relationship, because it's contingent. Just like I drew a black triangle. Yeah, I could have drawn any number of colours of triangles, but because I drew a black one, then I imposed upon it its particular colour. But I didn't impose upon it that triangle has to be three-sided. That's just its definition, that a triangle has three sides. Yeah. So that's what we mean. So therefore, when we say limited things means dependency, we mean it in two ways. The first way is that things exist in relationship with other things. One way. The second way is that relationship is not defined by the thing with its relationship with the other thing. Rather, it is imposed by it, upon something outside of the universe. Yeah, does that make sense? So, what did we say? We said universe is limited. Universe. Universe is limited. And we then said, if it's limited, which means it is, I've rubbed it off now, but we said it's measurable, has attributes, is quantifiable in a particular way. That quantifiability is in relationship with something else which is imposed. So therefore, limited will also mean it's dependent, based upon this argument that it needs something else in order to express its attributes. And that ability to express its attributes is not coming from itself, from the object, it's not coming from water, it's not coming from the fire, but rather it's coming from the system that's imposed upon it, which means it's other than water, other than fire, and therefore other than what's existent within the universe. So, therefore the universe requires something other than itself in order for it to exist, in order for it to have the limitations and the relationships of those limitations. Now, that goes back to so before I carry on, just a quick question. Could not someone argue that maybe it is experience, knowledge, but it is inherent to water? How would you answer that? Yeah, but when you say it's in experience, knowledge, inherent to water, what do you mean by inherent to water? Are we saying it's definition? Because let's say, for example, its definition is 100 degrees Celsius. Well, actually, if you go to the Everest, Mount Everest, you'll find that water will boil at 70 degrees Celsius because obviously the atmospheric pressure is less, and therefore they postulate that the less atmospheric pressure putting pressure upon the water molecules to stay in its liquid state is less, so therefore it requires less energy for it to turn into gas. Yeah. So as a result, we can see that this this relationship is not something which is inherent in terms of a particular definition of saying it's 100 degrees Celsius, it's 0 degrees Celsius, it's at room conditions. All of these things are just factors which are observed based upon experience, which could tell us, or it could imply to us, any other possible attribute. Yeah. If we have not seen any other water boiler at a different temperature, then how can you say it's not? Say it's contingent? Because good question. Because I can only say for sure that at that moment in time, the water that I boiled was boiled at 100 degrees Celsius. That's all I can say. That particular water that I experienced, that I boiled at 100 degrees Celsius. Yeah, in that one experiment. So if I was now to say that, if I was to repeat the experiment, what would I expect? If I took a beaker of water, 200 mils of water, I boiled it. It boiled at 100 degrees Celsius. Yeah, and it boils at 100 degrees Celsius, and I was to then say, let it cool down, let me repeat the experiment. What would I expect? Would I expect the same result or different result? Actually, we would say, in a strict empirical point of view, strict empirical point of view, this is a point that even one philosopher called David Hume talked about. He would say, actually, we don't know when we do the second experiment, even though the water is exactly the same, the beaker is exactly the same, the fire is exactly the same, because we don't know whether the second event will resemble the first event. It's an assumption. It's an assumption that we have in terms of that. Okay, so one brother said, could you write it up? It's going to be difficult to write this up. Yeah. So he says it's an assumption. The second time we do the experiment, it's an assumption. Just like the other type of water that we boil, it's an assumption that will follow, it will resemble like the previous water that we boiled. Yeah. So it's an assumption that we make, and that's an assumption that science is built upon. That our future expectations are going to follow the same pattern of our past experiences. There's nothing necessary for that to occur. It could be completely random, in fact. Yeah. Okay, got it. That's good. Right. So what we're saying, universe is limited. Therefore, limited also means dependent. Therefore, the universe is both limited and therefore dependent. Now, what's it dependent upon? And I'm going to end on this because I've spoken too much. But I get very excitable about this type of topic, as some brothers know. So when we talk about, what could it be dependent upon? Well, it could either be dependent upon something which is limited or unlimited. Yeah. So if it's dependent upon something limited, then it's going to have specific characteristics like those, yeah. And it's also going to be dependent, yeah. And then we have the problem of infinite regression, yeah, of that. So therefore it has to be unlimited. If it's unlimited, then it means it's not bound by measurable and quantifiable attributes. Yeah, obviously we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names and attributes, yeah, but they're not measurable and quantifiable. That's what we mean, yeah. So, you can't measure the amount of mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. We know it's beyond our comprehension, yeah, because our mind is limited and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond the concept of limits in our reality. Somebody said, okay, do a nice video. This is the nice video, bro. Inshallah, maybe in future I might break it down into smaller videos. So therefore we're saying it's unlimited, yeah? So this thing must be unlimited, which means that it's not dependent, yeah? And it can't be limited as well, yeah? So it's not imposed upon, it's not quantifiable. It's therefore, if it's not dependent, it's going to be independent. Yeah? Independent. Yeah, forgive the writing. Yeah, it's going to be beyond the concept of limits. And obviously, therefore, we're saying it's something which is not caused by anything, but causes everything or creates everything. And this is what we believe is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, isn't it? Yeah? Okay, I've spoken quite a lot there. Hopefully, inshallah, it was of benefit for the brothers and sisters who have had a quick look about that. There's lots of triangles and circles for those people who've just joined, like Qasim. Yeah, but it makes sense if you watch it from the beginning. If there's any final comments, questions, if it was good, please put comments. You like it, I'll do it again. If it was rubbish, just tell me, and then I'll just stop doing these types of discussions, inshallah. But inshallah, I went into a bit more technical detail because, a lot of the brothers here probably know quite a bit about this discussion as well. So maybe just to refine some of the points, some of it is just maybe refresher for some people as well. If some of the points here are a little bit heavy, a little bit complex, and require further reading or discussions or whatever, you can put comments on the video. You can also check that particular thread on Facebook where that question was asked, and look at what the other brothers also responded, because inshallah it was good responses that the brothers that they also gave, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for everybody listening. Yes, good video, more like this please, beneficial. Jazakallah khair. Just one final maybe remark before I finish. Bilal, hopefully inshallah the lighting was good. I had to rearrange all the furniture for you, and it was very difficult, but inshallah jazakallah khair if you were able to see me properly. Okay, I've got a quick question. Many people, including Muslims, use the argument of golden mean or ratio as science evidence of the Creator. Can you briefly outline why? Maybe in another video, but obviously they talk about this